Welcome to Mythology Matters, where ancient narratives unfold to reveal the profound connections between history, mythology, and theology. And if this is the kind of channel you definitely love to be glued on, you can go ahead to be part of the family right now. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notification bell so you are notified whenever we release a new video. Don't forget to share the channel, the video with your family, with your friends. It will definitely be wonderful to have them on the channel. Without any further ado, let's get right into the video. The true origins of Elves, Norse and Germanic mythology explained. What if everything you thought you knew about elves was wrong? Long before they became a graceful thing in fantasy stories, elves were feared, respected, and deeply woven into the spiritual world of ancient people. In Norse and Germanic mythology, they were not just magical creatures, they were powerful forces of nature, capable of bringing both blessings and destruction. So who were they really? Where did they come from? And why did their story change over time? In today's journey, we uncover the true origin of elves and the hidden meanings behind their legend. Chapter 1, The First Light, Norse Elves. In the frozen silence of the ancient north, where long winters stretched across the horizon and the nights were illuminated only by stars and shifting curtains of aurora, the people of early Scandinavia told stories to make sense of the unseen forces around them. Within the rich tradition of Norse mythology, the world was alive, not just with gods and humans, but with countless hidden beings that inhabited realms beyond ordinary perception. Among the most mysterious of these beings were the elves. To understand the origin of Norse elves, one must first imagine the structure of the cosmos as envisioned by the Norse. The universe was held together by the immense cosmic tree Yggdrasil, whose branches and roots connected multiple worlds. Each realm was distinct, yet interconnected, forming a vast spiritual ecosystem. Within this framework existed a radiant realm known as Alfheim, the homeland of the Light Elves. The elves of the Norse tradition, known as Alfheim, were not the small, whimsical creatures often depicted in modern fantasy. Instead, they were described as luminous, powerful, and deeply tied to the forces of nature and the divine order. Early sources such as the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda provide glimpses into their existence, though never with complete clarity. This ambiguity only adds to their mystic, as if they were meant to be understood partially, but never fully revealed. In Light Elves were said to dwell an Alfheim, a realm described as bright, pure, and almost heavenly. They were often associated with beauty, fertility, and prosperity. In many interpretations, their appearance was so radiant that they seemed to glow from within, embodying a kind of spiritual light rather than whimsical brightness alone. Some scholars suggest that these beings may have been viewed as semi-divine, occupying a status somewhere between gods and mortals. One of the most significant connections between elves and the divine world comes through the god Freyr. Freyr was a member of the Vanir gods associated with peace, abundance, and growth, was said to rule over Alfheim. According to tradition, Alfheim was given to him as a tooth gift, a symbolic present offered to a child upon the cutting of their first tooth. This detail is more than a mythological footnote. It reflects the deep connection between elves and the natural cycles of life, growth, and renewal. Under Freyr's symbolic guardianship, elves may have been seen as beings that influenced fertility of the land, success in harvests, and the general well-being of communities. In agrarian societies, where survival depended heavily on the balance of nature, such beings were likely honored through offerings and rituals. The elves were not distant abstractions. They were woven into the daily lives of the people. Unlike the gods who resided in Asgard or the giants who represented chaos and opposition, elves occupied a more subtle role. They were neither purely benevolent nor inherently hostile. Instead, they reflected the delicate balance of forces that governed the natural world. Their presence could bring blessings, but like all powerful entities in Norse cosmology, they demanded respect. In contrast to the light elves, Norse tradition also hints at the existence of dark elves, sometimes referred to as Dokafar. These beings were said to dwell beneath the earth, in shadowed regions far removed from sunlight. Some interpretations suggest that dark elves may have been closely related to dwarves, master craftsmen who forged powerful artifacts for the gods, including the mighty armor Gionel, wielded by Thor. This duality between light and dark elves reflects a broader Norse understanding of balance. Light represented clarity, growth, and harmony, while darkness represented mystery, depth, and hidden power. Rather than being moral opposites in a simplistic sense, these forces complemented one another, forming a complete picture of existence. Elves were also believed to inhabit natural spaces within the human world. Forests, hills, rivers, and ancient burial mounds were often considered places where elves might dwell or be encountered. These locations were treated with reverence, as disturbing them could provoke unseen consequences. In this way, elves served as guardians of the natural environment, reinforcing respect for the land and its boundaries. One of the most intriguing aspects of elf lore is their connection to the unseen and the astral. Some interpretations suggest that elves may have originally been linked to the spirits of the dead, particularly honored ancestors. Burial mounds, which were prominent in Norse culture, were sometimes associated with elven presence. This connection implies that elves were not merely independent beings, but part of a continuum between life, death, and memory. In daily life, belief in elves influenced behavior in subtle yet meaningful ways. People might leave offerings of food or drink in hopes of gaining favor or avoiding misfortune. Rituals such as alpha blood, private sacrifices dedicated to elves, highlight the personal nature of this relationship. Unlike grand public ceremonies for the gods, these acts were intimate, often performed within households or small communities. Ultimately, the Norse conception of elves reveals a worldview in which boundaries between the physical and the spiritual were fluid. Elves existed not as a distant fantasy creatures, but as integral participants in the fabric of reality. They represented the hidden forces that shaped nature, influenced human fate, and connected the invisible world to the visible realms and far beyond. In the glow of firelight within a wooden longhouse, our storytellers recited ancient verses passed down through generations. The elves remained ever present in the imagination of the Norse people. They were the silent watchers of Alfheim, the luminous beings of myth, and the enduring symbols of a world where magic, nature, and belief were inseparable. And those centuries have passed, the image of the elves, radiant, mysterious, and just beyond reach, continues to flicker at the edges of human storytelling, reminding us of a time when the world was far more alive with unseen wonder. If you have reached this part of the video, I definitely would love to know, have you ever watched a movie? Have you ever read a book? Have you ever listened to a story where elves were being described? If so, what was the title of that story? What was the title of that book? What was the title of that movie? Leave it down below in the comment section, and I would definitely be interested in reading, listening, or watching that same movie. Chapter 2. Shadows and Echoes, Germanic Elves. As centuries passed and the ancient traditions of Northern Europe evolved, the once radiant and divine image of elves began to shift. In the broader landscape of Germanic mythology, elves transformed from luminous beings associated with divine realms into more elusive, ambiguous figures, creatures of both wonder and unease, no longer confined to the bright halls of Alfheim. They became woven into forests, hills, and the hidden corners of the human world. Unlike the earlier Norse perception of elves as semi-divine beings connected to gods like Freyr, Germanic traditions present a more fragmented and varied image. Elves, often referred as Alben or Elben, were no longer clearly divided into light and dark in the same structured cosmological sense. Instead, they existed in a spectrum of hidden beings capable of both blessing and harm, beauty and terror. In rural communities across Germanic lands, elves were believed to inhabit natural environments. Dense forests, mist-covered valleys, isolated hills, and ancient burial mounds were thought to be places where these beings lingered. These locations were not simply landscapes. They were thresholds between worlds. Travelers passing through such areas were often cautious, aware that unseen eyes might be watching from the shadows. Over time, the perception of elves became increasingly intertwined with human experiences that could not be easily explained. Sudden illnesses, unexplained fatigue, strange dreams, or sharp, localized pain were sometimes attributed to elf activity. One common belief was the idea of elf shot, where invisible projectiles fired by elves caused pain or sickness. These phenomena, now understood through modern medicine, were once interpreted as direct interactions with supernatural forces. The fear of elves was not always rooted in malice, but rather in unpredictability, where elves believed to operate according to their own hidden logic, influenced by respect, offerings, and human behavior. If treated properly, they could bring good fortune, fertile crops, artistic inspiration, or protection of livestock. If offended, however, they might retaliate with misfortune or illness. This dual nature made elves deeply embedded in everyday life. Farmers, for instance, might leave small offerings of food or drink at specific locations, especially near boundaries of land or at significant natural features. These acts were not merely superstition. They reflected a worldview in which maintaining harmony with unseen forces was essential for survival. As Christianity spread across Europe, the traditional beliefs of Germanic peoples began to change. Pagan deities and spirits were often reinterpreted through a new religious framework. Beings that were once respected or neutral were sometimes reclassified as dangerous or even malevolent. Within this shifting cultural landscape, elves gradually lost their earlier divine associations and became more ambiguous figures in folklore. Despite this transformation, elves retained their connection to the natural world. They were still believed to inhabit places untouched by human development, deep forests, remote hills, and areas where nature remained wild and untamed. These settings reinforced their identity as beings outside the boundaries of ordinary human society. One of the most haunting developments in Germanic elf lore is their association with nighttime encounters. Stories began to emerge of elves visiting humans during sleep, influencing dreams, or causing disturbances. In some cases, individuals reported sensations of pressure on the chest, difficulty breathing, or vivid nightmares, experiences that were interpreted as being ridden by elves. These accounts contributed to a growing perception of elves as beings capable of intruding upon human vulnerability. This evolving image is vividly reflected in literature and folklore of later periods. The poem Der Erlkönig by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe captures the chilling essence of a supernatural entity luring a child toward death. Though interpretations vary, the Erlkönig is often associated with an elf-like figure, an elegant yet ominous presence that speaks in soft, persuasive notes. The story highlights a key theme in Germanic elf traditions, the blending of beauty and danger into a single, unsettling form. In these narratives, elves are not monstrous in appearance. Rather, their threat lies in their subtlety. They appear graceful, alluring, and intelligent, yet their intentions remain unclear. This ambiguity makes them more psychologically complex than pure evil creatures. They represent forces that cannot be easily categorized or controlled. Another important aspect of the Germanic elf belief is their role in explaining mental and physical conditions. In a time before modern science, unusual behaviors or illnesses were often attributed to supernatural causes. Elves were thought to influence the mind, causing confusion, melancholy, or altered states of consciousness. In some traditions, protective charms, iron objects. This belief may have originated from the symbolic power of metal forged through human effort, representing strength and protection against unseen forces. Such practices illustrate how folklore provided practical frameworks for dealing with uncertainty and fear. Over time, the figure of the elf became increasingly complex, no longer strictly divine nor purely demonic. Elves occupied a liminal space between categories. They embodied the unknown aspects of nature and human experience, forces that could neither be fully understood nor controlled. Despite these dark associations, traces of their earlier identity remained. In some traditions, elves were still linked to beauty, music, and inspiration. They could be seen as patrons of creativity or as beings who interacted with humans in subtle, meaningful ways. This duality ensured that elves never became one-dimensional figures, but instead remained a layered and evolving presence within folklore. Ultimately, Germanic elves reflect a shift in human belief systems, from a world where unseen beings were integrated into a structured cosmology to one where those same beings became more mysterious, individualized, and sometimes feared. They serve as a bridge between ancient pagan traditions and later cultural interpretations shaped by changing religious and social influences. From the radiant realms of Norse belief to the shadowy forests of Germanic folklore, their story continues to echo through time. But what do you think? Were elves guardians, tricksters, or something far more powerful? Share your thoughts down below in the comment section. And if you enjoyed watching this video and you have reached this part of the video, Definitely don't forget to like, share the video, share the channel, turn on your notification bells when you subscribe. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay curious.